Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Table of Peter podcast brought to you by Trinity United Methodist Church, located at 409 North Wilson Street, Paris, Tennessee. This is episode 3. I mistitled last episode as episode 3. I might have to fix that, but this is episode 3, entitled Dissolution of Marriage. I am your host, Christopher DeLane Searles, and as per the norm, I finally got to say as per the norm, on the other microphone, a more important microphone, Pastor Emily Walker. Hello.
Hey, Chris. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about yourself? How's the week been, even though it's Monday?
It's been Monday all day. Anybody else had a Monday all day long?
I had a pretty good Monday. I had time to actually browse around on Facebook dating a little bit.
Okay.
Not really putting a whole lot of efforts into anything, just browsing a little bit. I've decided to stop looking for the right person and become the right person. And by becoming the right person, maybe God will put the right person in my path and we'll be the right people for each other.
Wow.
So,
I think that's a really fresh approach. It's a great approach.
It's a struggle at age 50 after 2 divorces, trying to get back out there, and just a lot of insecurities going on right now. But take my time, and we're going to be talking about divorce today. You and I both have been divorced. I've been married twice and divorced twice, so obviously I don't got it figured out. So,
Well, I would say this is a really difficult topic. And I'm going to tell you, last week when you announced the topic for the coming week, my chin mouth was so wide, my chin hit the desk because
I saw your expression. That's why I give you a whole week to prepare for it. We're
Well,
going to be sharing some stuff, but not in detail.
Yeah, I don't know if I can be prepared. I will have to be honest with you. Let's just be real with the listeners and with one another. Sometimes when topics are so tough and when they get to be so personal,
Right.
it is often the last place you want to go.
Right.
But maybe when we actually just kind of push ourselves outside of our comfort zones a little bit and we face some of these hard things or talk about them, we realize that we're not in this by ourselves.
Right. And I just want to say divorce should be the very last resort. Do everything you can do to save your marriage, counsel, clergy, talk to somebody, try to get it worked out. But sometimes, enough's enough. How many times does he get to come home drunk, belligerent, 3 o'clock in the morning with another woman on his person, odor? How many times does he get to do that before she has to say, enough's enough, I'm over it? I can't, this is disrespectful to my marriage, disrespectful to me, and disrespectful to God. This is not what he intended. It's not how he wanted. How many times does she get to run around with his best friend or whatever before he's got to put his foot down? We know what the laws say. I've done some research because my first marriage put me through the ringer emotionally, psychologically, plunged me into a deep depression. I just didn't know how to deal with it. I knew what the church said because I've heard. I know what the Old Testament said. I know I had an experience one time. My mother and father, the man I call my father anyway, my stepdad, they were married and they decided to start going to a church. They wanted to become a member of the church. But since my biological father was still alive, they considered them to be living in sin and would not allow them to be. They could sit in the pews all day and get critiqued and criticized and made feel smaller than what they were. But to be a member, an active member of the church, it's very disheartening. And that's what I carried with me my entire life. Whenever I didn't want to get a divorce, but it had to get done.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I am so sorry, Chris. Just my heart hurts for you, even, and for your parents, hearing the witness that they felt from the church and the condemnation and
this
the
is
judgment.
the church that my dad grew up in.
Yeah. Well, that is heartbreaking to hear, and hopefully I would love maybe for us to unpack some of this and just see where we can learn and grow
Right.
in our understanding of divorce and the witness that the church could and should be in things that are going to be part of so many different people's lives. I mean, the divorce rate is pretty big, and so we definitely experience this throughout our families, and so we want to be a part of, hopefully, a strong, powerful witness of compassion and grace. And so yeah, let's spend a little time maybe unpacking this.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I will tell you, the first place I always try to take you is let's go back to the beginning.
Beginning.
And in the beginning, I look back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, and it does give us, I guess, some of that foundational material. Often as a pastor, I hear or see this used in weddings. And Genesis 2:24 tells us, "Therefore a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh." And so when we read that in the very beginning, in God's perfect plan, He placed male and female. He placed Adam and Eve. We read in the garden, everything was perfect. Life and humanity was sinless in that place and that time. And this was God's perfect plan, that they should become one. And I feel like this union was sort of meant to be unbreakable, to mirror God's unwavering commitment to us.
Right.
And so God gave Adam, the story goes, a helper or a partner.
Right.
And that helper or partner was, they were supposed to become one and be committed and enter into sort of this covenant relationship that God, that would mirror how God is in this covenant relationship with us, His people. But, and if we stopped there, if we stopped at Genesis chapter 2, right, it would look totally different. It would be this place of perfection. But then we flip the page, if you will, and we turn to chapter 3, and we began to see how all of God's perfect plan and His order becomes disordered through sin entering this created world. And when sin entered the world, we call it the fall.
The fall.
Disorder happened, and things no longer worked according to this perfectly created order that God had given us. So relationships, like the one that is initially given between Adam and Eve, pure, harmonious, one flesh, it becomes marred by brokenness. Like,
yes.
If I remember correctly in this story, it's, bear with me, but comical. I think in my mind's eye, I can picture things like this, and it seems comical. So when God begins to look for Adam and Eve after they've committed that first sin,
right,
He starts calling out to them in this garden, and the first response, obviously, is to blame someone else. And so Eve blames, the snake or the serpent tempted me. And Adam, who was standing there the whole time with Eve, says, but the woman you gave me, God, she gave me this to eat. So in that moment, we're one flesh, we're going to stick together, we're going to do this together, was distorted. Even from chapter 3 in Genesis, this became distorted, and the brokenness begins to be obvious even in the relationship with this couple that God put together Himself.
Right.
So I think that if we go back to that, we can kind of see how things fell apart, if you will,
right,
and how relationships, even the one relationship, marriage, this covenant between humans, was supposed to be a covenant and a commitment to become one. how that brokenness even is evident right there in Genesis. And the other thing that you already shared is divorce is painful.
Extremely painful.
Painful and difficult, and it's a reality that so many people and families live with today.
It's like a death. It's almost like a death.
It absolutely is. It is the death of that one flesh, if you will.
Right.
It's a death of how you have defined yourself in this committed relationship and this covenant relationship with another person.
I've handled myself better at funerals than I did with this divorce.
Right. It's certainly a place where our brokenness, our woundedness, our humanity creeps out in hideous form, if you will.
Yes.
I mean, in my mind's eye, when I went through the divorce, I thought we could just have a kind, nice, amicable divorce. But I learned the hard way, if you will.
Right.
I know I'm good at always learning the hard way. Let's be honest.
Over here.
My parents will tell you
here.
that. But I learned that there's no such thing as a nice divorce, because that is, like you say, it's like the death of something that was supposed to last. And so we grieve.
Because nobody gets into a marriage like, well, starts planning their divorce.
No, absolutely. People
Start
don't.
planning your future, not your divorce.
People do not enter into that lightly, I think, as a general rule. And people do not expect their world to fall apart in that way. And so I think about, there are a lot of scriptures that address divorce.
Right.
And as we kind of take a few minutes here, we'll maybe work through some of them. One of the scriptures in the Old Testament might ring a bell for a lot of people, and that's looking back to Deuteronomy. Divorce in the ancient Israelite society. Deuteronomy. Let's say that 3 times real fast, Chris.
Mosaic law.
That's right. That's exactly right. In chapter 24, verses 1 through 4. And there are specific instructions. See, when Moses was trying to lead and govern these people, the Hebrew people who became this Israelite society into a nation, they needed rules, because they were not loving God first. They weren't loving each other and living in community very well together. That humanity creeping out in all kinds of ways, that brokenness, that sin. And so all of these laws were sort of developed to give this community of people some structure and some ways that they could live within guidelines to honor God, that relationship with Him, and to honor their relationship with one another. And so one of those laws, the Mosaic laws, deals with divorce, and it talks about if a man found indecency in his wife, then he could write her a certificate of divorce. He could send her away, and she would be free to remarry. And so here's the actual verse. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he's found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out from his house. So in those days, obviously, it was a very male-oriented world.
Very one-sided.
So I would have been in trouble for sure.
Right.
And my husband will vouch for this. My husband, he will tell you that there are times that probably he noticed I was slacking on my responsibilities. And so if he finds no favor, if she doesn't find favor in his eyes, so maybe she forgot to sweep the floor that day. Maybe the food was cold by the time he came home.
It could be anything.
Maybe the bread didn't turn out right. It could be anything. And he was free and clear to walk away.
He can make up anything, just whatever he wanted.
Yes.
He's bored, So just make
And
up something.
sure, and in a man's world, or if he actually saw somebody else